She's a certified yapper, but looks good doing it.
Gabby, I love you.
It must suck being that hot.
What up, y'all? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Gabby. Hi. Hey, if you're new here, hi. And if you're not new here or you're not yet subscribed, you need to subscribe right now because I don't know what you're doing. On the road to 5K, we're almost there. And thank you, everybody, for y'all's support. Oh, my God. Okay, so today we're going to be reacting to 10 biggest WWE gimmick downgrades. Oof.
10 of the biggest WWE gimmick downgrades ever. Number 10, Karrion Kross. Now it's amazing how much Vince McMahon screwed up Karrion Kross. The former NXT champion had everything that McMahon loves in a wrestler: size, height, and an interesting gimmick. Yet in a matter of seconds, Vince McMahon and company managed to undo all of the hard work that Triple H made with Kross in NXT. Kross wasn't just the NXT champion when he arrived on the main roster, he was also undefeated. Kross was pushed as a monster, but he was booked like a jobber who lost in a matter of seconds. Now granted, the man
Karrion Kross literally has to look to be a top star. It's crazy to see like a big ass dude lose. I know he's like getting up there now. He's over with the crowd, so hopefully they even started doing anything with him yet? I don't know. But
who was a former WWE champion, but this 2021 version of Jeff Hardy was not the same as the 2009 Jeff Hardy. He was a veteran at this point, and it would have been assumed that he would put over the new upcoming star. That match instantly killed Kross as a character, and fans had lost any and all interest in him on the main roster. So Vince McMahon tried to shake things up for the NXT champion. Unfortunately, it only made Kross's character even worse. Not only did they strip everything that made Kross unique and interesting down in NXT, but Kross randomly showed up in a weird outfit that was probably purchased at a local sex shop. Unsurprisingly, this didn't get Kross over, and the former NXT champion was then released a short time later. Now wisely, Triple H brought back everything that made Kross compelling down in NXT, and whilst it took a while, Kross finally seemed to be getting over with the audience. We're only just waiting now for WWE to pull that trigger, as Kross is undoubtedly a future megastar in the company. Number 9, Paul Burchill. Now, WWE is no stranger to wacky gimmicks, and sometimes those silly gimmicks can get over. Paul Burchill, whose first run in 2005 consisted of him going from a ruthless ass-kicker to a Jack Sparrow imitator. Now the thing is, Paul the Ripper was seen as a fun mid-card gimmick that the fans were genuinely invested in. It also helped that his entrance was cool as hell as he actually swung down from the stage. But the problem with this gimmick was that it always had a glass ceiling. WWE clearly didn't know where to go once he reached that ceiling in 2007. Fast forward to 2008 and WWE brought him back. Burchill was a talented performer, so it was cool to see him get another shot in the WWE. Katie Leah, his storyline sister, was also a talented performer, and these two could have been really something special. However, Vince McMahon got the bright idea that Paul and Katie were more than just brother and sister. They were the Cersei and Jaime Lannister of WWE. For some reason, Vince McMahon had a thing for incestuous relationships, as he also once pitched an idea for Stephanie McMahon to carry his own baby, but luckily that was scrapped. Now, unlike Game of Thrones, this was not a popular gimmick. Now, the company only dropped subtle hints at the incestuous relationship before putting a full stop to it once they made the transition into the PG era. Sadly for Burchill and Leah, they floundered on Raw and SmackDown since their disgusting story was put to an end. Number 8, Jesse. Now, WWE got one rapper over, so why not repeat it with Jesse from Jesse and Festus?
okay, they wrong for that Festus character. Why would y'all do that?
Admittedly, Jesse and Festus was a fun little act, but it became apparent that Vince McMahon saw more value in Festus than Jesse. Once the pair broke up in 2009, Vince probably felt that Jesse needed a new character and gave him Slam Master Jay. The problem was that fans didn't take any of it seriously. The reason the Doctor of Thugonomics gimmick got over with Cena was because it felt genuine to who Cena was, plus his charisma really helped carry the act. Slam Master Jay felt like a poor Vanilla Ice imitation. It didn't help that Slam Master Jay was essentially a jobber between the ropes. Now, we're not saying that the Jesse and Festus gimmick was an unbelievably innovative idea, but it certainly went from bad to worse when he became Slam Master Jay. It even hurts more to the fact that Slam Master Jay is actually a good wrestler. The gimmick had Future Endeavored written all over it the moment he came out to the generic and lame rap beat and started talking like Jamie Kennedy on Malibu's Most Wanted.
Yeah, that definitely did not fit him at all. He looks like a Jesse from down south with a Festus behind him talking about biscuits and gravy, okay?
Sin Cara. Now, there's no doubt in WWE's mind that the Sin Cara project miserably failed. Although Although to credit Hunico, the man that briefly took over the gimmick, he did his best to get the gimmick over as much as possible. However, once the Sin Cara vs Sin Cara rivalry ended, the former WWE star was unmasked and revealed to be a normal Latino. Well, we weren't expecting anything else, but it took away the mystique from the character. Once the Sin Cara gimmick was done and dusted, Vince and company thought that they would take it back to the streets and turn Sin Cara into a Latin gangbanger. Because in Vince McMahon's eyes, that's the only one of few things that a Latino can be in the WWE. Either that or landscapers, as seen with the Mexicools. Now, there wasn't anything outright offensive about the gimmick, it was just stereotypical garbage about how WWE typically saw their foreign talent.
That is offensive.
If it wasn't a foreigner hating America, then they would usually represent the worst part of the culture stereotype. The gimmick was lazy and lowbrow, banking on all the stereotypical acts of a Latin gangbanger, instead of giving Hunico and Camacho an actual character with substance. Now, the fans just couldn't take Hunico and his homie Camacho seriously. They played their parts well, but they were doomed the moment they were saddled with this one-dimensional gimmick. Number 6. Chavo Guerrero. But what's worse than playing a Latin gangbanger? Well, turning a Hispanic guy into a white guy. Chavo Guerrero denounced his Hispanic heritage and began playing a stereotypical rich white male. Why did Vince give Chavo this gimmick? Well, it's not entirely clear, as Chavo himself explained that he went to a Raw show and Vince started greeting him as Kerwin White. Like Hunico, there was no depth to the gimmick. He was just imitating a white guy, and how that translated to his matches didn't do much for Chavo in the slightest. The gimmick was simply offensive. There was absolutely no heel logic for why Chavo was pretending to be this character, plus it shamed the Hispanic culture and made fun of the white culture. For Kerwin White, there was no point to his character. He was a goofy heel who couldn't be taken seriously as an upper card talent, nor was he entertaining enough to be accepted as a lower card name like Santino Marella. The gimmick essentially destroyed his career in WWE. Number 5. A-Train. Now, A-Train was always a solid wrestler, but the problem with Matt Bloom is that he never actually stood out. When he was a single star, he was rather forgettable. His run in TNA saw Trish Stratus and Tess take center stage, and when A-Train was released in 2004, he just didn't stand out from the sea of big men. Now, he wasn't bad enough to be put on anyone's worst wrestler list, but he wasn't good enough to be taken seriously as a top star. From 2005 to 2011, Bloom competed in Japan, and though he never reinvented himself past his A-Train persona, he gave good performances in his time with All Japan and New Japan Pro Wrestling, which is how he got a shot returning to WWE in 2012. Now, it's well known how much Vince loves big sweaty men, so it wasn't a surprise to see Lord Tensai, his new WWE name, upon returning, getting a main event push right out of the gate. Now, even though 8 years is a long time, plenty of fans remembered him as simply as A-Train, and for those fans who didn't, Tensai didn't particularly have buzz surrounding his name coming in. New Japan was hot in the North American market during his time, so barely anyone witnessed his stint there, so Lord Tensai came across as another bland giant that had the backing of the WWE machine. For the most part, his matches coming in were fine. Heck, his bouts against Cena and CM Punk could be labeled as good, but nobody could take Lord Tensai seriously in this gimmick, and the Japanese influences did nothing to enhance his talent. In fact, WWE even made him speak Japanese. It added to the gimmick. However, Tensai obviously couldn't speak the language and was clearly reading off from the notes. This made his promos seem insanely bland. And despite getting a rare clean win over John Cena and CM Punk, WWE pulled the plug on Tensai within a month, and he ended up becoming a comedy character with Brodus Clay until his retirement. Number 4. Chad Gable. Chad Gable is an accomplished amateur wrestler who competed in the 2012 Olympics. You would think that WWE were given the Kurt Angle treatment, but he had one thing that hindered many men in WWE: his height. Gable and Jason Jordan did pretty well in NXT. In fact, American Alpha had plenty of takeover classics that reminded fans of the original Team Angle duo of Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin. But from the moment that Gable and Jordan jumped onto the main...
I understand, like, you want like your big bad... You want your big bad heel to be big and big, whatever. Wrestlers do not look like the way they do back then. Y'all can't just give everything to the biggest and baddest looking character, which sometimes they really don't. Like Karrion Kross, for example. But, yeah, like, y'all can't be going, oh, he's too short. What?
Fans of the original Team Angle duo of Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin. But from the moment that Gable and Jordan jumped onto the main roster, it became clear that Vince saw Jordan as the star, not Chad Gable. The duo didn't last as a team for a full year on the main roster, and Gable hopped around to several different teams since he disbanded with Jordan. Then the 2019 King of the Ring tournament came around and Gable looked like a star. Fans knew that Gable was a talented performer and his tournament matches were a must-see. It finally felt as if WWE were going to give Gable a singles push that he truly deserved. Sadly, he lost to King Corbin, but that wasn't even the terrible part. For some odd reason, WWE decided to lean into Gable's hype by calling him Shorty G. I guess in Vince McMahon's mind, Gable taking on the insulting name was a form of strength and relatability, but it was an embarrassingly awkward stage name that hindered Gable as a performer. Now sure, WWE was giving him a push during the Shorty G stint, but it was impossible to take Gable seriously as a top star. His character was based entirely on his height.
That could have been, you could have like reversed that, have him as a heel, people make fun of him for his height, and he just beat their ass. Like he did with Sheamus just now.
And there was no depth or nuance to this gimmick that allowed Gable to really showcase that he could be a big star in the company. And Chad Gable himself has deemed this as the lowest point in his WWE career, but thankfully he got rid of the stupid name and has been better off without it. Number 3, Ricky Steamboat. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat is one of the best wrestlers to ever step foot in a wrestling ring. He had classics against Randy Savage and Ric Flair, and plus Steamboat was very popular with the fans. Unfortunately for Steamboat, he made the grave mistake of asking for a week off because his wife Bonnie was having their child. Reportedly, Vince McMahon was furious when he requested that time off, so the former WWE chairman did everything in his power to embarrass Steamboat. Vince had Steamboat drop the Intercontinental title to Honky Tonk Man after only holding it for 65 days as punishment. But Steamboat would leave the WWE in favor of World Championship Wrestling, but whilst he sustained an injury in the ring on his foot, he managed to fully recover and then eventually returned to the WWE in 1991. But he wouldn't return as just plain old Ricky Steamboat, he would return as the Dragon Ricky Steamboat, literally a dragon. Steamboat would come out to the ring in a dragon costume from head to toe, and he was literally breathing fire. It was at this point that Steamboat could only be seen as mid-card at best. Steamboat would have proudly represented WWE as a top star in the company, but the selfishness of Vince McMahon killed a promising athlete's career. Number 2, Earthquake. And many consider Earthquake one of the underrated performers of his generation. The WWE Hall of Famer first made his splash onto the scene in All Japan Pro Wrestling, until he made his transition over to WWE in 1989. Now Earthquake was a good worker for a man of his size, and his breakout feud was against the legendary Hulk Hogan. Earthquake would also have great rivalries against Jake the Snake Roberts and Greg Valentine, highlighting just how good of a performer he really was. However, Earthquake was always overshadowed by some of the bigger men on the roster. He truly didn't connect with fans until he teamed with Typhoon to form the Natural Disasters. The gimmick was nothing new, but the Natural Disasters were an entertaining act that added dimension to the stacked tag team division at the time. Earthquake would briefly leave the company after a 2-year stint with Typhoon and came back in '94, but that run was very short-lived. Fast forward to 1998 and Earthquake came back to WWE, but in the eyes of management, there was no way that John Tenta could come back as Earthquake. Tenta lost a considerable amount of weight, so Vince reportedly felt that he needed a new gimmick because fans wouldn't believe that he was the Earthquake. Unfortunately for John Tenta, he was given one of the worst gimmicks in the Attitude Era. He came back as Golgo, one of the members of the strange group known as the Oddities. Golgo wore a gold mask and was portrayed as a man who had a fascination with South Park. This gimmick was nothing more than a comedy gimmick. While the faction certainly had its fans, the group was simply a collection of misfits. The character Golgo was rather silly and comedic moments involving the Oddities rarely hit. While it's understandable why Vince decided to change Tenta's gimmick, instantly giving a lower card gimmick made fans forget that at one point this was a man who was almost going to end Hulk Hogan's career. But now he was just simply a joke. And number 1, Brutus Beefcake. Although he never won a major singles championship throughout his WWE career, Beefcake's illustrious career saw him in memorable feuds against Randy Savage and Mr. Perfect. In fact, Brutus Beefcake was the first man to beat Mr. Perfect in the ring. Unfortunately, a major accident prevented Beefcake from climbing up the division even further. Following his huge win over Mr. Perfect, he got into a serious parasailing accident that forced him out of action indefinitely. According to Beefcake himself, he was helping a friend prepare for takeoff while parasailing, and during this time, the pilot mistook a cue to take off and Brutus's friend was somehow pulled into the wrestler's face with his knees crushing Beefcake's facial structure. Beefcake reportedly lost his nasal cavity and jaw, and he also had trouble breathing on his own. It took over 100 feet of wire and 32 screws to help reconstruct a new face. Now Beefcake would make his return in 1991, but under a misshapen mask, while wearing a fishing basket around his neck. It's not clear what the new gimmick was, though there were reports that claimed that Brutus was playing a character called a Marina. The Marina was actually a very short stint for Beefcake as he didn't even wrestle under the bizarre gimmick. The gimmick was dropped randomly later in '91 as Brutus Beefcake simply returned as his previous character without much explanation. The reasoning for the transformation was clear, but it's still unknown why WWE chose to give Brutus such a bizarre character. But there you have it.
Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. Put down in the comments what you want to see next. And we're on the road to 5K, almost there. And if you haven't watched Interview with the Indies, where I interview indie wrestlers around the Gulf Coast, please do that. Oh my God. Thank you. Bye.